Well, good morning. Please rise in body or spirit and sing with me hymn number 346. Come, sing a song with me. Welcome to this sanctuary where we create hope through the care we show one another as we search together for that mysterious presence of life all around us. Let us settle ourselves in and breathe together. Take a deep breath in with me. And out. In again. Finding the peace and the love that surrounds us. And let our breath fill us with gratitude, for here we are once again in this sanctuary, and it's September. Here we hold love at the center, and that is surely a blessing. Today, during our time together, we will contemplate how to live love through the practice of invitation. That is our worship theme for September. I'm Heather Norby. I'm the spiritual life director for this fantastic congregation, and I use the pronouns she and her. In order to build this community, we need love plus connection. And that will lead to spiritual and ethical transformation. This is your community, and so we ask that you please be an active part of it by joining us in the following activities and events. And there's lots of them coming up. Today, at 1 o'clock, we'll have our social justice meeting. And then at 2 o'clock, we will invite Red Tent Initiative in with us to plan what we call the Raven Dinner Theater. Although this year I think it's the classic monster dinner theater, but same concept. I do have some food, some stuff for sandwiches, and some chips and hummus, and some watermelon, so you won't go hungry. So please plan on joining us at 1. I think maybe we'll meet in the social hall. We'll just leave things set up, and at 1 p.m. we'll just start meeting. During the social justice meeting, I do want to discuss the UU Climate Justice Revival, and this is sort of a big deal throughout the UUA, and I'm hoping to get lots of you engaged in that so that we can pull it off, make it happen. There's conversations involved, there's worship involved, there's religious education involved, and so it's going to take all of us to really figure out what our local community needs in terms of climate justice and social justice, racial justice, immigration justice. So that all kind of comes together in this climate justice revival. So please join us. Let's see here. This Wednesday, September 4th, we're bringing back the evening programming, and we'll have dinner worship. Actually, first, we have the worship committee meeting at 5 p.m., and you're all invited. Petra's out of town, so please come keep me company. And then dinner worship is at 6:30 p.m. I'll make some rice. You can bring toppings for the rice to share with other people. And at dinner worship, we say the conversation is the sermon, and we will, of course, be talking about the practice of invitation. Everyone's welcome. Next week is our annual water communion. We've been doing water communion in this congregation for many years. It sort of symbolizes a coming together of the community after sort of a low-key summer. And this year, so you bring in water, and I'm asking you this year to bring in water from a place that feels inviting to you. And when you add it to our communal bowl for water communion, you can speak about why that place feels inviting for you and how you will build upon that feeling to help us build a truly inviting community. And that's next week, and of course, you don't have to speak, but you can bring in water and just add it to the bowl and be a part of our coming back together. Friday, September 13th, is our Freaky Friday ice cream brainstorming party, during which we eat ice cream and come up with ideas together for worship services for the next few months. So we have a theme for each month, and then I gather all of your ideas for music and what other fun and interesting things you want to do during worship. We have music practice every Saturday at 4 p.m. here in the sanctuary. Please join us for that. You do not have to be an accomplished musician in order to sing with us or play an instrument. Just come have fun. Creativity Matters is a new small group program that I'm doing. You don't have to sign up for it. You just have to go to our newsletter and find the packet and engage in the exercises that are in there. You also don't have to be an artist. And then we'll meet on the last Wednesday or the fourth Wednesday of the month and share our creative journey for the month with each other. Okay, and I've had a lot of people asking, like, how do I become a member? Okay, finally, Vaisal and I we've got a date, September 29th. We will start our starting point classes, and these are for new people, anyone who wants to learn about the church, about Unitarian Universalism. Whether you are ready to become a member or not, you can come to the class and engage and learn all about us and get to know other people too. So September 29th, after our worship service, we will begin, and it's like a 4-week thing, so we'll have to nail down the dates once we all get together and find out when we're available. All right, well, one more thing, and that's a big thank you to Tom Mead for fixing our sign and mowing the lawn. We always need folks to mow the lawn, and Tom is a regular, and Crystal, and they get it done, but they'd love it if you wanted to mow the lawn too. So let them know. And also thank you to Ken Schmidt for doing work around our playground, so that's a safe place for our children to play. Thank you. As always, please check the back of your order of service and our e-newsletter, which is published on Mondays, for more information. Okay, Gail.
Good morning. My name is Gail Rushford. I am on the Finance Committee here with this congregation, and my pronouns are she and her. Let us create our sacred space by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Our words today were written by Anastasia Bayrosh. Soul Fire is the title. As we light this flame of hope, may our congregation become a kaleidoscope of souls and people. In the presence of this flame, in me, in you, in us, is an invitation to sit at the table. May we tend our soul fire through these challenging and trying times to open the hearts and minds of all who enter through our doors. Dorothy, would you please do us the honor of lighting our chalice? I don't remember. Wait. Did you do this? Thank you. So please rise in body or spirit to sing hymn number 362, Rise Up, O Flame.
I think this is the part where I get to tell a story. Who wants to come up, young and young at heart? Because I need some help telling the story. Anybody else? There. All right. This is probably a story that you know pretty well, so you get to help me tell it, all of you. So our theme this month is the practice of invitation. So I want you to think about how invitation is being practiced in this popular story called Snow White. Do you like Snow White? No. Okay, well. You'll help me anyway, right? Darn it. Okay. Y'all, Snow White? No. Okay. All right, might be on my own. In a faraway kingdom in rolling hills and sparkling rivers lived a young princess named Snow White. With skin as white as snow, lips as red as a poppy, and hair as black as night, Snow White's beauty was legendary. But her true beauty showed from her kind heart and gentle spirit. However, in the castle walls resided another woman, the queen. Good sound effects. Snow White's stepmother. This queen, known for her vanity and jealousy, had a magic mirror that spoke the truth. Every day she would ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" For many years the mirror would reply, "You are, your majesty." This pleased the queen very much, for she desired nothing more than to be the most beautiful in the land. One day, as the queen stood getting ready in front of the mirror, a scary response filled the room. "My queen, though you are fair, Snow White is far fairer than you." The queen's blood ran cold. Rage and envy filled her. How dare a mere child outshine her? Blinded by jealousy, the queen made a wicked plan to get rid of Snow White. She ordered her faithful huntsman to take the princess deep into the forest and never return. The huntsman, who was kind-hearted and could not bear to harm the young princess, took her far into the woods, but let her go, leaving her to find her way. Terrified, Snow White ran deeper into the forest, tears streaming down her face. The trees whispered and the birds chirped, but all she felt was fear and loneliness. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows, Snow White stumbled upon a charming little cottage. The cottage was so tiny and cute that it seemed to belong in a fairy tale. Exhausted and scared, Snow White knocked on the door, and when there was no answer, she quietly entered. Wait, was she invited in? She just let herself in. She's trespassing. Inside, she found a cozy, messy little home. There were 7 small bowls, a table filled with half-eaten bowls of porridge, and an array of tiny chairs. Snow White felt tired and hungry, so she decided to clean the cottage and prepare a meal for its inhabitants. She sang as she worked, and her voice was so sweet that it echoed through the woods. Meanwhile, the cottage's owners were not children, but 7 dwarfs who had been living there for years. They were miners who spent their days digging for precious gems. When they returned home that evening, they were surprised to find their cottage neat and clean and inviting, with a delicious-smelling meal waiting for them. The dwarfs, known for their kindness and love for music, were surprised to see a young girl at their doorstep. But upon hearing her story, they welcomed her with open arms. So who's being inviting? The dwarfs. The dwarfs felt sorry for Snow White and offered her a place to stay. She gladly accepted their kindness and soon became their friend. She helped with the cooking, cleaning, and tidying up, and the little cottage became a warm and happy home. Meanwhile, the queen, filled by her obsession with beauty, once again asked the magic mirror on the wall.
Who's the fairest of them all?
To her anger, the answer remained the same: Snow White. Snow White was still the fairest of them all. And she learned from her magic mirror that Snow White was still alive and living with the dwarfs. This time, the queen wouldn't be stopped. Dressed as an old seller, the queen arrived at the cottage and offered Snow White a beautiful, shiny, red apple. She tricked Snow White with a poison apple. Taking a bite, Snow White fell into a deep sleep. The dwarves, returning home to a very quiet cottage, found their beloved friend seemingly lifeless. Heartbroken, they carefully placed Snow White in her bed, covered with flowers, vowing to protect her forever. News of Snow White's bad luck spread throughout the kingdom. But a young prince, charmed by her stories of beauty and kindness, ventured deep into the forest. Reaching the clearing where the dwarfs kept watch, he was mesmerized by the sight of Snow White sleeping peacefully in her bed. And then what did he do? Oh, he kissed her. Drawn by a strange force, the prince leaned down and kissed Snow White. As if awakened by a magic spell, Snow White's eyes fluttered open. The kiss, a symbol of true love, broke the curse of the poisoned apple. The dwarves, overjoyed, welcomed the prince into their midst. Those dwarves are really friendly and welcoming, aren't they? Soon Snow White and the prince fell deeply in love, their bond stronger due to the hard times they had faced. The queen, very angry by yet another turn of events, stormed into the dwarves' cottage. But this time, the dwarves, alerted by the forest animals, were prepared. They chased the queen away, stopping her from harming Snow White ever again. And Snow White and the prince, with the dwarves by their side, returned to the castle. Justice prevailed, and the kingdom celebrated the triumph of good over evil and the power of true love. Snow White, with her kindness and compassion, became a beloved queen, ruling the land with wisdom and grace, and they lived
Happily ever after.
Of course they did. So who was practicing invitation? The dwarves. Did they even know Snow White? She just like intruded in on her house, but at least she cooked him a meal. So in what way were they inviting? Like, how were they practicing invitation? What do you think? You can use your imagination. It's a fairy tale. In the movie, they have a long argument about it, and they finally decided, okay.
Six of them
sure. Yeah?
I like your version better where they just let her stay there because she's in trouble and not, oh, we finally have a woman to do the dishes for us.
Yeah? Hello? She was in trouble. They wanted to help her. And so they greeted her and they brought her in. And I think they all ended up loving each other, you know, as friends, as close friends. All right, well, that is my story. Fairly uneventful, Sage says. Yes. That's okay. I'm going to talk more about it with the grown-ups later. I know they're excited. So you all are welcome to put a stone into the water, think about the practice of invitation, and go out with Melissa and Jerry and, you know, have a good time. Learn lots. And we'll sing. Yeah? Our ritual of the sharing of joys, concerns, and sorrows embodies a belief that there is power in being together and in holding one another in the significant, the precious, the hard, and the joyful moments of our lives. In our Joys and Sorrows book, you are able to write any significant joy or sorrow occurring in your life that you would like for the congregation to know. It sits on the table at the entrance of the sanctuary before the service, and I read from it before we take the time to come on up and put pebbles in the bowl. Tim shares that Ken and I had to let our dog pass last week. Sorry about that. It's so hard to lose our fur babies. But his joy is that August 31st, yesterday, Tim and Ken celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary. Congratulations. Crystal shares, my cat Margot is not feeling good. She is stumbling and tumbling. She is on pain medication to make her more comfortable. I am grateful for modern medicine to hopefully ease her discomfort. I hope that she feels okay, Crystal, and I'm sorry to hear that. I don't know who this is from, but I have to go 3 weeks without medication before I can switch to my new one. Please keep healing thoughts and vibes for me, and we will indeed. Also, I talked to Kino, who had a back surgery and had a rough time of it, but he's at home healing, and anybody who knows Kino knows that he asked me to mention Saint Fiacre, who is the patron saint of gardening and healing, and yesterday and today are like the days to celebrate Saint Fiacre. So am I saying it right? You'd think after all these years I would know how to say it. Saint Fiacre, the days to celebrate him were yesterday and today, and of course Kino feels like he's finally home and healing from his surgery, and that this bless this patron saint of gardening and healing. Petra is out of town indefinitely. She's visiting Glenda Littlehill in Wisconsin, and Glenda has been ill, so please keep them in our thoughts.
Indefinitely?
Well, I mean, she can't. This is news to her husband. No, I mean, she can't. She canceled her flight home. I don't know when she's coming home. Do you?
So I'm available for...
Well, while she's out, which she will be home soon, I'm sure, just not on Wednesday as planned. Josh was also alone and could use some conversation. You are now invited to come forward and place a colored stone representing your joys, concerns, and sorrows into the water. Each stone that we drop into the water represents a different thing that you may need in the midst of this moment. You may take whichever stone or stones feels right to you and drop it in the water, connecting to others, feeling the power of being together in this community. have anyone on Zoom today? Yes, we do, so we will put stones in for them. She's working on it.
Ben,
Ben,
Kayla,
Kayla,
Judy,
Judy,
and Jim.
and Jim. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. Certainly is a blessing to have this supportive community. And before we move on, Macy wants me to let you know that she's having a Labor Day picnic here tomorrow at noon. So, if you really enjoy this community, come on out again tomorrow at noon and just enjoy time together. Thank you, Macy, for coordinating that.
So here we gather, tucked back in this friendly neighborhood between the beautiful tall pines. We are a community of people who have arrived from many different paths, yet we seek a common goal: to bring more love to a hurting but beautiful world. As Unitarian Universalists, we aspire to reach this goal through our shared values, one of which is the value of pluralism. Pluralism is about celebrating that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We endeavor to build a pluralistic community in which we covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning, embracing our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. But this community can only be built with the time, talent, and treasure of each one of us. Our ushers will now pass the plate so that we may live into our value of pluralism.
Thank you all so much. So let us take a moment to center and contemplate that which we are exploring this month, the practice of invitation. To practice invitation is to live with love at our center, inviting in all that we already love, all that we endeavor to love, and all that is difficult to love. The book of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 46 to 47 say, "If you love only those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others?" To greet people who are not your kind of people feels really uncomfortable. To love what is difficult, what seems strange and different, and what is imperfect is hard work. But all of this ensures that we are truly practicing invitation. Notice that there are two parts: to greet and to love. To be a truly inviting people means going beyond simply greeting. It means also to embrace, to empathize with, to listen without judgment, to support, to continue to hold love at the center, no matter how hard that is. That is invitation. Reflect on these questions. How inviting do you think you are to those that seem difficult, imperfect, even unlikable? Without compromising your boundaries, can you still hold space for those people? How do you practice invitation? Or do you? What do you think it is that makes you an inviting person? or what gets in your way. This month, we will explore many questions about the practice of invitation, for as Poet Laureate Tracy K. Smith says, a question is an invitation all in itself. She writes, a question is a pursuit, an invitation to envision and explore a series of possibilities, to struggle and empathize and doubt and believe. And so I invite you to center yourself in this practice of invitation for the month of September. I invite you to notice how you practice it, why you do or don't do things that would be inviting, and how you can help make connections and build this beloved community by being more intentional about your practice. What questions do you have about your practice? Take a few quiet moments to contemplate your questions. You might even consider writing them down, taking them home, hanging them on the mirror, thinking about it throughout the month. How do you practice invitation? Or what gets in your way?
Our reading this morning is from the Bible, book of Luke, chapter 7, verses 36 to 50. And it's about the time that Jesus was anointed by a sinful woman. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner." Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. Two people owed money to a certain money lender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears. You did not put oil on my head." You did not give me a kiss. She wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. "You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Let us sing now about our faith in one another with the hymn in our teal hymnal, 1053, "How Could Anyone?" 1053 in the teal hymnal.
Anyone ever tell you
Last week, an email arrived in my inbox from a Lutheran pastor whose newsletter I subscribe to. It was entitled, "Shutting Up the Asshole in My Head." Nadia Boltz-Weber is this pastor's name, and she always seems to send just the right spiritual insights at just the right time. Her message started with a question. She asked, "What thought do you have most often about yourself to yourself? In other words, what thoughts about yourself play on repeat in your head?" I want you all to think about that right now. What thoughts do you most often have about yourself to yourself? I know that as a middle-aged woman whose body is changing rapidly, sometimes my thoughts aren't that great. So I'm curious, how many of you thought something negative or unflattering? You get that negative self-talk going? Yeah, negative self-talk, I see that. How many of you regularly think positive things about yourself? Good. Oh, yeah. We got some pros in the audience. Reverend Nadia's insight was this. There's a big gap between one's actual self, like the one we're always criticizing, and one's imagined self, you know, the one that's all organized and has it together. And in that gap lies our inner asshole, the part of our thought processes that criticizes us for not being our perfect imagined selves. We become frustrated, resentful, not very nice, or inviting to ourselves. She writes, "Our culture colludes in this fantasy of self-perfection, this idea that you can somehow become the ideal version of yourself. You just haven't eliminated the right things from your diet. You just haven't gotten the right promotion yet. You just haven't manifested it yet." But here's the thing. No one in the history of people has ever become their ideal self. It is, and will always be, a moving target, she says. So after I read her email, I realized, as I was also beginning my work on the practice of invitation, that one cannot possibly embody invitation if one can't even be inviting to one's actual, authentic self. And so today, I am not going to skip ahead to how you can be inviting to others. I'm going to sit right here with you and work on you being inviting to you, your whole, imperfect you. And once you've gotten that down, the rest of the practice of invitation might just come naturally. You see, I don't think that big critic in your head only talks to you, it talks through you, and thus it impacts others and how inviting you seem to them. If you can't shut them up during your self-talk, it is probably hard to shut them up during your talk to and about others. So what do we do about this? How can we become more inviting to our own selves? Through the timeless stories we've heard today, I've identified 4 lessons, 4 ways in which we can learn to get rid of that negative voice. 1, recognize when perfectionism is showing up. It's dangerous. 2, be forgiving. 3, go into the wilderness and invite in all the many aspects of your imperfect self. 4, awaken. Leave the wilderness and build yourself a haven with gentler thoughts and, as Reverend Nadia recommends, use humor if it helps, and some cursing too. She's a sweary preacher. So perfectionism. Tima Oken, who has done an incredible amount of work to identify and dismantle our very harmful white supremacy culture, writes, "Perfectionism is the belief that we can be perfect or perform perfectly. The question has to be asked, though, according to who? Who decides what perfect is? Perfectionism is the conditioned belief and attitude that we can be perfect based on a standard or a set of rules that we did not create and that we are led to believe will prove our value. Perfectionism, she writes, is the conditioned belief and attitude that we can determine whether others are showing up as perfect and demand or expect that they do so. Our culture uses perfectionism to preserve power and the status quo. As long as we are striving to be perfect according to someone else's rules, we have less energy and attention to question those rules and to remember what is truly important. And what is truly important? Our healthy selves and our healthy relationships. And we cannot have either one of those if we are constantly beating ourselves and others up with the voice in our head that demeans us because we are nothing like our imagined perfect selves that are created according to other standards and will never exist. We heard two stories today in which perfectionism showed up. In Snow White, perfectionism was strived for by the queen, the so-called evil stepmother. The magic mirror reflected society's standards, and the queen felt that she needed to meet those standards perfectly if she were to be at all worthy. When she did not, she became resentful, vengeful, and quite frankly, disconnected from reality. Disconnected from her stepdaughter and presumably from her husband. Perfectionism becomes evil because it disconnects. In a Unitarian Universalist religious context, disconnection can be perceived as a sin, opening up the places where evil, or those terribly negative voices in your head, get in. When we strive for the illusion of perfection or for what society expects or accepts, we lose our authenticity, our true selves, and the ability to build meaningful relationships. We lose the ability to live according to our own beliefs, desires, and values. We then do not possess the skills to engage in a practice of invitation that values the authenticity of others. In the biblical story, we understand Simon to be the character that disconnects from others through the vice of perfectionism. Jesus steps in and teaches us that it is through forgiveness that we can invite others, those difficult, imperfect others, into our homes and into our hearts. But we're talking about getting our perfectionist voices out of our own heads. And so in this instance, we must talk about being forgiving to ourselves. Whoever has been forgiven little loves little, Jesus said. So forgive yourself with great abundance then. Jesus also taught us that we are all sinners, right? In a universalist context, we might not use those words, but we might say that we all make mistakes because none of us are perfect. And it's far better to learn from those mistakes than criticize ourselves. Forgive yourself endlessly. When you choose to forgive yourself, you choose to learn from your mistakes, which leads to trusting yourself because you are now relying on your direct experience rather than looking to society to tell you how you should think or feel. This doesn't mean you stop receiving input from others, but it does mean that once you get it, you then turn to yourself, your beliefs, your values, your desires, to determine what the best way forward will be. This can be difficult and uncomfortable, of course, forgiving yourself and accepting how imperfect you are and how much room, no matter how old you are, you still have to learn and grow. Transformation is an ongoing process, never complete and never perfect. This is why the wilderness archetype shows up in so many fairy tales and stories in which the character goes through some sort of difficult time, yet learns and grows and transforms. This is why Brené Brown wrote a book called Braving the Wilderness, because it is in the wilderness, alone and lost and facing danger, in which we encounter and wrestle with our true natures. People who actually go into the wilderness by themselves write about what a transforming experience it is, as they get in touch with their intuition, learn to hear the calls of their spirit, and find a clearer path forward for their life. In the wilderness, people have to face all the aspects of their imperfect self, and they learn to invite all of that into the wholeness of who they are. When we are going through hard times in our lives, times when we feel like we are lost, when we don't have control, when we are fearful, when we have only ourselves to depend on, we are in the wilderness. Snow White was left in the wilderness by the hunter. She was alone and scared. In the wilderness, especially when you are by yourself, it is sometimes necessary to make decisions that are guided from within. Snow White chose to enter a strange yet comforting house. Now here's where I ask you to stretch your imagination a little bit. As a fan of Jungian fairy tale analysis, I see all the characters in a fairy tale as different aspects of one person's psyche. Snow White, the neglected child, had to make a decision that would get her out of the wilderness and into a haven, and she chose a small, comfortable cottage in which lived 7 different characters. Now, in the Grimm fairy tales, these dwarves don't have names. But in the Disney rendition, we know them as Happy, Doc, Grumpy, Dopey, Bashful, Sleepy, and Sneezy. And I propose that they are all different aspects of our imperfect yet lovable selves. Snow White, who was growing up and turning into an adult, made a very comfortable home here with all the aspects of her imperfect self. It is in this part of the story, in the safe space in the wilderness, that the self becomes clear about who they are, forming an appreciative, loving, and caring relationship. As one Jungian analyst wrote, she is beginning to develop an ego identity. The budding flower is beginning to blossom. And furthermore, the dwarves, of course, were miners. They mined precious jewels, discovering wisdom and beauty for themselves, instead of receiving society's standards as the only way to perfection. French novelist Marcel Proust wrote, "We do not receive wisdom. We must discover it for ourselves, after a journey through the wilderness, which no one else can make for us, which no one can spare us. For our wisdom is the point of view from which we come at last to regard the world." Now, Snow White, of course, still in all her adolescent innocence and trusting ways, did not listen to the wisdom of the dwarves when they told her not to open the door to strangers. Well, actually, she didn't open the door, she opened the window. Resourcefully rebellious she was. But yet it was a mistake brought on by temptation, because unlike the story of Jesus in the wilderness, which was a different story we didn't tell, but she could not pass the test and resist the splendor of a juicy, sweet apple. And I have to say, things get a little convoluted when you combine Snow White and Jesus in one sermon. And then Snow White fell into a deep sleep. I wonder what she was thinking in that deep sleep. Was the voice of the critic, the perfectionist, the queen silent? Was this voice so silent that she came to truly learn how to practice invitation and to love all parts of herself? Was this period of stillness transformative? She was, after all, awoken by love and came to be known as a kind, gracious, and wise ruler. Perhaps that deep sleep was renewing. Perhaps she was undergoing what is called metanoia, a change of heart, and gaining a new sense of self. The Reverend Nadia Boltz-Weber says, metanoia isn't about becoming your ideal self. It is the ability to think new thoughts when new things happen. It's the ability to stop that shit that is on repeat in our heads. Remember, there are 2 parts of the practice of invitation: to greet and to love. Snow White and the 7 dwarves did not just greet one another, they came to love one another. Jesus did not just greet the so-called sinful woman. He recognized her love and her faith, and he forgave her. To be a truly inviting people means going beyond simply greeting. It means also to embrace, to empathize with, to listen without judgment, to support, to continue to hold love at the center no matter how hard it is, and to begin all of this by practicing it with yourself. And so I invite you into a meditation in which you can invite new thoughts, new, positive, gentle thoughts, and your whole imperfect self right into the center of love. So get comfortable. Breathe. Relax. Relax as if you just made it through the wilderness and you are tired, but feeling whole. Invite in gentle thoughts about yourself and expect that only love can awaken you. We're going to begin this meditation with a poem, and then a song, and then a period of silence. When I ring the bell at the end of the silence, we will awaken to the kiss of a song about love. This poem was written by Derek Walcott, and it is called Love After Love. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. Let us now sit in silence, find a stillness as we listen, as we feast, as we meet and smile again at the stranger that is ourself.
Our closing words are from Rabbi Rami Shapiro, titled Unending Love. We are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by arms that find us even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us even when we are too embittered to hear. We are loved by an unending love. We are supported by hands that uplift us even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us even when we are too weak for meeting. We are loved by an unending love. Embraced, touched, soothed, and counseled. Ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, the smiles. We are loved by an unending love. Our closing hymn is titled One by One.
You all get to sing with us. It's a new one, so we'll learn the tune.
Please join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice, which are on the screen and also on your program. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world.
We'll go out into the world right now. Remember, it is inviting you. Can you show up as your true and authentic self, inviting your whole self in and being inviting to others? Because remember, you are loved, you are worthy, and you are a blessing. Thank you, and please join us in the social hall.
Yeah, I texted you guys. No, I just wanted to meet you guys, you and Crystal for a few minutes after. Well, no, I'll do that after because you guys have to get going. Well, I don't know what she has to do after dinner. I know you're busy. I just